The movie starts with introducing us to the S-class species, or Kaiju, the giant creatures that are appearing around Japan. The first class is called Gomus and is exterminated by the Self-Defense Force. The second species, called Mammoth Flower, is exterminated through carbon gas and fire. The third species is called Paguilla. It emits freezing gas and freezes Tokyo. A female scientist discovers its weakness, and they exterminate it. They find S-class species No. 4, Flying Kaiju, and name it Larugius. It escapes and no one knows where it went. They create Disaster Prevention Agency and establish S-class species suppression protocol enforcement unit that consists of 5 people. The SSSP Chief Tatsuhiko Monokata, Team Captain Kimio Tamura, Strategic Planner Shinji Kaminaga, Biologist Yumi Funaburi, and unparticle physicist Akiya Sataki. Then another Kaiju appears. S-class species number 5, Dissolving Kaiju Kaijo, which is SSSP's first mission, and they exterminate it. Then another one, S-class species number 6, Subterranean Kaiju Pagos. It consumes radioactive material, and SSSP manages to exterminate this one too. We see them in the present time, in a military helicopter and going on a mission because another Kaiju has appeared. We see them evacuating the civilians from the village when SSSP arrives. They get into a tent filled with soldiers and sit on their tables to get their laptops out so they can get to work. They try to detect the Kaiju, but they can't succeed because of the debris around it. Everyone tells what they could find about it, and Yumi says the heat and light weapons wouldn't work on it. Then they spot it near the electric substation, and we see the electricity and they're gathering to someplace. They realize that the Kaiju eats the electricity, and it becomes visible. Kiyomiya orders them to cut out the electricity, and the Kaiju gets mad and breaks the place down. Then a soldier says that they named it, and it's known as the invisible Kaiju Neronga. Neronga continues to walk through the village and breaks the houses down. Kimio orders them to attack it before it causes any more harm, and they launch missiles at it. But Neronga destroys them all with its electrical powers before they even touch it. Then it attacks some places with its power and they shake from it. Kimio asks if anyone has an idea of how they can attack it, and they argue about it, but they can't find an option that would work. Shinji sees a little boy running on the village roads. He says he'll handle this and leaves. We see him running in the woods when the soldiers detect an unknowing object coming towards them from the sky. They can't detect if it's a Kaiju or not, and it crashes near them, causing its impact blast to shake them. We see Neronga flying away because of the blast, and we see Shinji in the forest, trying to cover the boy to protect him from getting harmed. The object slowly gets up, and we see a silver-looking giant in a human form. Neronga attacks it with electricity, but nothing happens to it. One of the soldiers informs them that they named the giant Ultraman. Ultraman starts walking toward the Kaiju, and Neronga turns invisible while trying to go back and hide inside the forest. Ultraman collects his energy to attack Neronga while everyone in the tent looks excited. He hits Neronga and it explodes. They analyze the air and report that it turned into plasma, but he still didn't get affected. Ultraman flies to the sky, and Kimio tells them to follow it, but they lose him. We see Shinji coming out of the forest with the boy in his arms. Then we see a woman walking on the street while we hear the people around her talking about Kaijus and Ultraman. She gets to the office of SSSP and introduces herself to Kimio, but we don't see her face. She says that she's the new intelligence agent that's sent to join the SSSP, Hiroko Asami. Kimio informs her that her job will be about the mysterious giant. She turns her back and sits at the table where the others are. Yumi introduces herself, but Hiroko tells Yumi things about their personalities before they say anything to her. Yumi gets impressed, and she points to Shinji, saying he was close to the giant that day, and we see Hiroko's face. She introduces herself to Shinji, saying they are buddies, and they have a tense talk. We don't see Shinji smiling much throughout the movie. Hiroko asks him about the giant, and Shinji says he was unconscious. We see Kimio in Tatsuhiko's room. He asks Kimio how's Hiroko, and he says she's outstanding, quick to adapt, and has good judgment. They talk about Ultraman, and we see another Kaiju appearing. Then get ready and get to the area. They inform everyone that it's moving inside of the mountain, and it's going in a straight line directly toward the nuclear waste storage center. Yumi says that it's %99 Pagos, and Kimio says that's very bad. He calls Tatsuhiko and gives him the news. They decide to try to eliminate it underground, and they throw missiles from the fighter plane. Pagos gets hit but doesn't pass away, so Kimio tells them to keep bombing it until it does. The plane runs out of missiles and flies away. Pagos gets out on the surface, and Shinji says it's only a mountain away from the facility. He looks at the others and gets out of there when he sees no one's looking at him. We see him running in the woods with a medal. He presses something on it and turns into Ultraman, but the silver lines on his body turn red. The others get out of the tent to look at the Ultraman, and he flies to the Kaiju while the others follow him. He gets there and stops the Kaiju right before it gets to the facility. He swings it around and tosses him to the side. The Kaiju get back up and they start fighting. Pagos pushes Ultraman to the walls of the facility and starts harming the building while Ultraman tries to stop him. He manages to kick it far, and we see the others getting out of the car with their protective suits against the radiation. Heigos opens its mouth and starts attacking Ultraman with its poisonous beam. Ultraman dodges it at first, but then he looks at the SSSP and starts embracing the radiation, then neutralizes it to protect them. He slowly walks up to the Kaiju while his red linings turn to green and punch the Kaiju in the face to eliminate it. Heigos falls to the ground, and Ultraman turns to look at SSSP. He then gets Heigos and rises to the air, and they lost him again. They go back to the camp and see Shinji there. Then we see Akihisa, Yumi, and Hiroko back at the office, talking about Ultraman. Kimio comes in and goes to talk to Tatsuhiko after asking where's Shinji. The others talk about how weird that Tatsuhiko is here instead of his room that is on another floor, and Yumi says she hopes there isn't something wrong. The electricity goes off right then and their computers get broken. They see Zarab, an extraterrestrial like Ultraman. He introduces himself to them and fixes their computers with a simple move, saying his power caused them to burn. He asks them to take him to their prime minister, saying he's here to establish friendly relations with this country, and we see him with the prime minister. Then we see Shinji with a man in his car. They talk about Zarab and how he's planning on telling the secrets of this country to other countries. They say that Zarab can dominate the world and the human race with the technology he has. The other man leaves and Zarab appears next to Shinji. They start talking and Shinji asks him why he wants to eliminate all humans. Then he points a gun at Zarab, but he controls Shinji and makes him fall asleep. He turns them invisible and gets out of the car. We see the team in the office when a phone comes to Kimio about Ultraman destroying a facility, and they watch him through the TV. They shoot him with missiles, but it doesn't work. They tell the Prime Minister that Ultraman had vanished and the lights in the building go off. Zarab appears, telling them that he had warned them about this. Then we see the team watching the footage again and Hiroko says it's weird. It's almost like he wants to make sure they saw who did this. Kimio says it doesn't matter. Ultraman is their enemy now, and he gets a phone saying they found Shinji's car. They all talk about how he would never do that, and then they find a video of a man in a white suit turning into Ultraman in the forest. Hiroko says there's no trace of altering, so the video is probably real. They find other angles and see Shinji's face. They all look shocked and Kimio asks them if they still can't reach him. He says someone must have to kidnap him. They don't find any trace of Shinji, and Hiroko says only one person can do this. Then we see Zarab talking with the Prime Minister and offering him help to destroy Ultraman. He tells them about his weaknesses and answers their questions. One of the men in the room says he doesn't think it really was Ultraman who destroyed the facility, and Zarab tells them that they'll understand when he reappears. Then we see Shinji tied to a chair in an empty place. Zarab appears and asks him where he hides the tool that helps him transform. Shinji doesn't answer him, and Zarab tells him he can no longer transform anyway and disappears. Then we see Hiroko looking at her bag and finding a package from Shinji. She opens it and sees the tool with a note from Shinji saying he'll leave the beta capsule with her for now. Ultraman appears in the city again, and Kimio tells his team to fight against whatever's disturbing their peace, even if it's Shinji. They get ready to go to the area, but the man Shinji talked to in the car appears next to Hiroko, and he tells her that Shinji told him to go to her if something happened. Hiroko asks Kimio if she can leave, and the two head to another way than the rest of the group. The man tells Hiroko what happened, and he tells her where Zarab is keeping it. She thanks him and leaves with the car. Kimio, Yumi, and Akihisa get to the city, and Kimio talks with the soldier while we see the Ultraman destroying the city not so far away from them. They talk, and Kimio tells the soldier that they can only wait now. The soldier asks him to wait, and we see Hiroko opening the door of the place where Zarab keeps Shinji. She gets in and they start talking. Shinji admits to her that he is the Ultraman, and Hiroko slaps him for not saying it to her. Shinji asks what she could have done if he told her, and Hiroko goes back to free him. She asks him if he's extraterrestrial or a human, and Shinji says he's both. She gives him the beta capsule back, saying that there's an imposter of him and it's destroying the city. She asks him to stop it, and a hand crashes into the building that they are in, and it takes Hiroko. Shinji turns into Ultraman and hits his imposter. Hiroko flies into the air and Ultraman hits the imposter again, causing him to hit a building. He grabs Hiroko and puts her down safely. They look at each other, and Ultraman uses his power to throw his imposter into a building, and it turns into Zarab. He flies away from Ultraman and starts chasing it. Ultraman catches him and they start fighting while flying. Zarab manages to throw him away, and Ultraman comes back and attacks Zarab from under him. Zarab gets thrown much higher in the air and Ultraman eliminates him with his power. A red light appears in the sky and Ultraman flies away. We see the authorities ordering everyone to find Ultraman, and we see SSSP talking in the office. They talk about how the government wants to use Ultraman as a weapon, and Kimio says he saw his old friends from CIA and SIS around the building this morning while he looks out of the window. Kimio asks where Hiroko and Akihisa show them news about Shinji, and Hiroko saying that they have eloped. Kimio says it's understandable that she wanted to disappear, but Yumi says it's unlike her that she didn't inform them about it. Then Kimio gets a call about Hiroko, and they go to the city. They get in front of a crowd of people and see Hiroko as a giant. Kimio tells the soldiers to hold the fire, and he gets on top of a building with his team. They try to yell and ask questions to Hiroko, but she doesn't hear them and walks past them while looking blankly. Yumi says she looks like she's hypnotized, and we see the police struggling to hold the people back in the street. Hiroko hits the building next to her and people start to run away. The soldiers come up next to the SSSP and tell them they are getting ready to attack her, but Kimio tells them to hold it back. They hear a voice coming from somewhere, and it tells them it would be wise to not attack her. He tells them that this is just a demonstration and it's a presentation about what they can do for their planet. He says Ultraman is not the only one with that technology, and Hiroko falls to the ground. We see Tatsuhiko talking to Kimio on the phone and saying he'll be there. They close the phone and Kimio says the ability to transform the humans into giants could lead to the militarization of Ultraman. Then we see Shinji in front of his own deceased body in the forest. Then we see Hiroko's body, wrapped in plastic and laying on the ground when we see Tatsuhiko, Kimio, Yumi, and Akiyasa inside of a container and talking about what came up from their analysis, which is nothing. A man appears behind them and introduces himself to them. He says his name is Mephilas and he's the extraterrestrial number 0. He actually came to Earth before Ultraman and he came to bring this planet gospel. Tatsuhiko asks him to prove that he's an extraterrestrial, and they get out. Mephilas snaps his fingers and a box comes down from the sky. He snaps his fingers again and it opens in the middle. Mephilas tells them that this is a beta box. It's a miniaturized version of Ultraman's beta capsule. He turns Hiroko into her human form to prove to them that it's real. Hiroko comes out under the plastic wraps while looking confused, and the SSSP looks at Mephilas in shock. We see the Prime Minister going to his room to talk to Mephilas. He creates a screen that tells about self-defense against extraterrestrials by making humans giants. He says he's against violence, but power is necessary when it comes to violent beings like Zarab. He offers to turn them into giants in return for them believing Mephilas is the superior conception. The Prime Minister says that they'll consider it. Then we see Akihisa and Yumi in the office, talking when Hiroko comes in, looking shaken, and she manages to throw herself to her chair. She says they put her through all the humiliating tests, but found nothing. She gets angry and opens her laptop to show videos herself while saying everyone knows her face. She can't go back to PSIA now. She talks to herself and says she'll never forgive Mephilas for this, and a message from Mephilas pops up on her screen right as she says that. She plays the voice message and hears him apologizing to her. He asks her to allow him to make amends for his mistake. He deletes all the footage on the internet and Hiroko gets up, screaming in happiness. We see Mephilas in the kids' park, sitting at the swings with Shinji and swinging. They talk and he tells him that he wants to rule this planet. He asks Shinji to work with him or step down. Shinji asks him if it was him who woke the bioweapons of this planet, and Mephilas says no, it was the humans who did it. Then Mephilas says he used the Kaiju to lure him out. He fought with the Kaiju and helped him make humans feel physically powerless, and his beta box helped to make them feel intellectually powerless. He wanted them to learn firsthand their dependence on the mighty. Mephilas tells him that he's the first of human fusion, so he's important. That's what he wanted to know all along. Then the park suddenly goes quiet and the police surrounds them. SSSP gets out of their car and runs to the two while Mephilas asks Shinji to drink with him and he makes them disappear. We see them sitting at a bar and talking. Mephilas asks for his answer and Shinji says he'll not side with him. Mephilas tells him that they know his every move on the planet of light, where they are from, and that he'll bring doom to this planet. Shinji says even so, he'll protect the humans. Mephilas says that it's a shame that they couldn't agree. Then we see Shinji calling Hiroko and asking her to meet with him. Hiroko says she'll let the team know and they hang up. We see them together and Shinji tells them that he needs to steal the beta box. It's too dangerous for humans right now. Other species from other planets might declare war on them if the humans use this. He says Mephilas had already cut a deal with them and he's going to give them the box tomorrow so they don't have time. They argue about how they'll find it and Yumi says they can track it by Hiroko's smell inside the box. Shinji smells Hiroko and says he's got her scent now. He can track it. Then we see them signing the papers to give the box. Mephilas snaps his fingers and the box appears, but Ultraman appears behind it and gets it into his hand. He throws it into the military plane behind him and Mephilas says it's unfortunate that they must fight. He gets to his full form and they first fight with their powers, but both of them manage to dodge them, so they start physically fighting and SSSP watches them from the plane above. They stop for a moment and use their powers again. Mephilas starts walking towards Ultraman when he explains to him how he's draining his power and gets really close to him. He sees another extraterrestrial with different colors behind Shinji and stops all of a sudden. He says he's stepping aside and this planet is no longer worth eliminating him over. He says he'll get his beta box and Ultraman gives it to him. Mephilas tells him that there's trouble afoot, so he should leave before things get unpleasant, and he vanishes. The plane lands and the soldiers arrest SSSP team. We see them in a hotel and Hiroko asks why they're not in jail if they abuse their power, and Kimio says Tatsuhiko is trying to get them restored and to keep them safe. We see Tatsuhiko talking with a government official. Then Kimio gets a phone saying that they're free to go. We see Shinji in the forest, in front of the deceased body of Shinji, and talking to the extraterrestrial that Mephilas saw. He calls Shinji Lapaya, but then he stops and says he'll use the name they gave him, Ultraman. Ultraman tells him that Shinji passed away when he was trying to protect the little boy from the blast of his impact. Ultraman says he wants to understand him, and the extraterrestrial says so this is why he decided to do the forbidden and merge with a human. Ultraman says it's right and asks him if he came from the new emissary from the planet of light. The extraterrestrial says his name is Zafi. He's now the new watcher of the human, because he broke the rules of the planet of light. At the same time, he's their adjudicator. The humans are likely to evolve in the same way as they are, therefore they decided to dispose of them. Ultraman says he doesn't believe in that decision. He thinks it's a mistake, and Zafi tells him that the mistake was his fusion with a human. Now every intelligent life form in the universe knows that humans can be used as a bioweapon. The best decision is to wipe them all while they still can. He brings out a weapon and shows it to Ultraman. He asks if it's Zetton, and Zafi says yes. He's activating it and it'll exterminate the human race with the entire star system. Shinji's body disappears and Ultraman starts walking away while Zafi asks him if the intelligent life on this planet is worth dying over, but he doesn't respond to him. We see Zetton in the atmosphere, starting to assemble itself. We see a bunch of people going on with their daily lives, and they see Zetton in the sky. Office's phone rings and Kimio tells them to not pick up unless it's Tatsuhiko. They talk and Yumi says they are trying to get the Ultraman to do something. Kimio says that humans were always dependent on gods and Ultraman is the only thing they have closest to a god right now. Then Shinji gets in and they all get shocked. He says he must tell them something and Kimio asks if it's about the thing in the sky. He says yes. Kimio says he would like to learn the details, but it's dangerous for him to be here, and the government official gets in right then. He asks Shinji to come with them. They talk and the government official threatens him with the lives of his teammates. Shinji gets defensive and tells him that he'll wipe humanity before Zetton if he does it. The government official steps down and gets out. They start talking about Zetton and Shinji says Zafi is only following orders, so their only way is to destroy Zetton. Kiasa gets out of the room saying humans are nothing and they can't do anything. Then we see him sitting at the stairs and crying. Then we see Shinji putting a flash drive on the table and getting out. We see him with Hiroko outside and she asks him if he can destroy Zetton. Shinji tells her that he can if he doesn't try, and Hiroko tells him that she trusts him. Shinji transforms and flies to Zetton. He uses his powers to attack it, but they don't affect it. Zetton creates a defense mechanism and starts shooting at Ultraman. He tries to resist but gets shot at the end and starts falling to the earth. Zafi comes up to him while he was falling and asks him to stay aside and watch humanity's purge, but he says no. Then he falls to the sea and we see him in the hospital, tied up to machines. The news gets spread and the Prime Minister decides to not hide Zetton's mission from the humans anymore. We see Yumi working alone in the dark office and Akiasa comes in. They talk and he says the humans are useless. Then Yumi points at the flash drive that Shinji left and says he wasn't thinking like that. Akiasa takes it and opens it. They see the beta boxes theory while they hear Shinji telling them he didn't give them one, but he wants humanity to create one with their knowledge. He says the rest is on Akiasa now, and Akiasa makes a plan to create one. We see them formulating and working on it. Kimio and Hiroko go to tell this to Tatsuhiko, and he says he'll talk to his higher-ups. We see Hiroko telling these to Shinji and asking him to wake up. Then we see Zetton moving out of the orbit to get to its final firing position. Shinji opens his eyes and sits up saying there's no time. He tries to get the beta capsule in Hiroko's hand and she stops him, asking him to listen to them first. We see the SSSP walking and Akiasa telling Shinji what they created. He tells him that he has 1 millisecond to hit Zetton after transforming. Kiyomiya asks what will happen to Ultraman after, and Akiasa says that they predicted that he'll be sent to some parallel universe. Kimio says the plan is out, they can't risk losing him even if it's for humanity, and Ultraman says it's fine. Humanity's future is his priority, and his life is just a tool to use for that. We see him outside with Hiroko and she says she trusts him and asks him to come back. Ultraman says he'll be right back and smiles at her. He transforms and flies next to Zetton. He gets really close, pushes the button again, and manages to hit it in a millisecond. Zetton explodes and everything turns black and white. We see Ultraman trying to get away from the pull that the explosion created, but he gets sucked inside and it disappears. SSSP looks to the sky with a sad face, and Hiroko starts to cry. We see Ultraman in a place with just some colors, floating when we hear Zafi calling for him to wake up. He opens his eyes and Zafi tells him that he would have never found him if it wasn't for the signals of his desire to survive. They talk and Zafi tells him that he's wounded and he says he'll take him to his home, to the planet of light. Ultraman asks him to send him back to the Earth. He's sharing this body with a human, and he needs to live. They argue about it and Ultraman asks him to give his life to him so he can live longer. Zafi asks him if he really wants to do that even if it means his own passing, and Ultraman says yes. Zafi tells him that he'll grant his wish and Ultraman thanks him. We see him opening his eyes and he sees Kimio, Yumi, Akiasa, and Hiroko looking at him with happy faces. Hiroko says welcome home and the movie ends there.